Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben.
This is Diego Sanchez, Randy Couture,
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 202. Dennis and Casper here with a new episode of Submission Radio for you. After the interesting night that was UFC 248, Cass, we thought, who can we get on this program to have a bit of a fun chat? And we got some fun guests on the show. One guy that hasn't been on for a while, that was a big staple down here at Submission Radio.
Yeah, that's right. It's been way too long since we've spoken to Tim Kennedy. It is time to bring the man back on. We used to chat to him all the time. And now, in the light of this UFC 248 main event with Yoel Romero, Israel Adesanya, it's time to speak to the man who obviously faced Yoel Romero in one of his most, if not most, controversial fights at UFC 178. We all remember Stoolgate, and there's just a whole bunch of things to speak to Tim Kennedy about. Obviously, Jon Jones versus Israel Adesanya. The man trained with Jon Jones for years and years. The criticisms that Jon Jones has faced. Diego Sanchez and Josh Fabia. There's a whole bunch of things to pick Tim Kennedy's brain about, so we've got him on the show. Also, Jared Cannonier. I mean, who better to speak to at the moment than Jared Cannonier? Obviously, at one point, scheduled to fight at UFC 248. Whole bunch of opponent changes. In the end, didn't fight on there. Injured pec, torn pec. We want to get his thoughts on the fight and what exactly is next for him. And then one of, if not the best analysts in the whole MMA game, Luke Thomas, gracing us with his presence, returned to the program to talk about, obviously, UFC 248 and a bunch of other things. So, yeah, sexy, fun show. I'm excited, dude.
Oh, man, I'm so excited. And it's like, we just got to get into this thing because there is so much to talk to these guys about. Just quickly for you guys at home, social media, all the DMs and messages are open. We try to respond to you guys as quickly as possible. And also, Cass, a lot of people approaching us about sponsorships on the program. And just letting anyone know that's listening out there that the spots are getting surprisingly packed really, really quickly. We're going to be working with some great brands over the next few weeks and stuff like that. So if you do have a brand that you want to sort of work with Submission Radio, and we only sort of work with brands that we believe in, but definitely shoot us an email ASAP because it looks like the first part of the year is starting to get pretty packed up. So that's just at the usual social media. You guys can hit us up, shoot us a DM. And of course, down in the comment section below, we love your comments. Leave us your comments, say hello, give us your thoughts on UFC 248 and what all the guests have to say. And of course, in all the social media as well, chuck it in the comments. Me and Casper read them ourselves. With Cass, without further ado, we have our first guest on the line. You're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our next guest is known for his fantastic analysis on both Morning Combat, the Luke Thomas Show on SiriusXM, and of course his very own live chat. He is kind enough to jump on once again and chat to us. Luke Thomas himself, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you, man?
I'm doing well, Submission Radio boys. I have missed you. I hope things are well on your side of the world.
That sounds very sincere, Luke. We're happy that
it is.
Happy to be.
There's no toilet paper here, Luke,
voice.
So everybody needs to feel sorry for us, you know?
I saw some clip that went viral about some ladies fist fighting over toilet paper. I didn't realize it was so serious down there.
Yeah.
You didn't know me and Casper would fight over toilet paper, but there you go. So now let's talk about what's important because we're going to have a lot of time with you today and we don't want to be greedy. What would you, let's jump straight into it. And that is the big topic, which is what would you say was to blame for the UFC 248 main event under-delivering for fans?
You know, here's the thing. Anytime an event like this is over and neither guy does a lot to the other, I mean, yes, the leg of Yoel was beat up, but, no one got dropped. Neither guy was especially tired when the 5 rounds were over. I mean, I don't think either would say that was the toughest fight that they were in. I think the natural inclination among fans is to say, well, they're kind of both really at fault, right? And not just fans, I think commentators or, anybody really. There's a lot of just the natural response, the way your mind works would tell you that the blame would go both directions. And as you begin to think about it, maybe you might go one way or the other. In reviewing the evidence, I just don't think you can do that in this particular case. Now, if folks think I'm wrong, you can shoot me an email, lukethomasnews@gmail.com, to tell me what I missed. But I went through that fight with a fine-tooth comb to the best extent that I could. And I just don't believe that the evidence shows, really in hardly any capacity, that Adesanya is to blame for the state of that fight. I would pin it, I wouldn't say squarely, but certainly predominantly on Yoel Romero. And the reason why I would say that is when you go and you look at what happened, you're beginning to see some weird narratives come out of the fight. Like people like, oh, I mean, this fight really told me that Adesanya would just have no chance with Jon Jones. Really? Like, what would you take from this fight that would give you that kind of indication? That doesn't, to me, sound like especially sound analysis. And I'm also hearing something to the effect of, oh, well, you know what? This is what happens when you have two counter strikers fight each other. But Adesanya wasn't really, sometimes, but not really counter striking. That's not actually not accurate. Now, he has spent time in certain fights where he counter strikes. There was times in this one where he was trying to counter strike a little bit. But in general, that is exactly the opposite of what was happening. The reality is when you go and you look at this, two things become abundantly clear. Number one, Adesanya made numerous attempts over the course of 25 minutes. Now, you could argue maybe he should have made more, but in general, he made numerous attempts consistently over time to what I would say is break open the vault, pick the lock, whatever metaphor you'd like to use, to break through this incredible wall of defense that Romero was using both in terms of the tactics and sort of as a mental posture in the fight. And he got through not very successfully from any attacks from the waist up, obviously pretty successfully from attacks from the waist down. In fact, he had targeted the legs more in this fight than any other fight in MMA, certainly in the UFC, he's ever had. He's never targeted the legs this much ever. And the reason for that is because Romero had this incredible defense along the way. He had really good vision, never bit on the feints, and any kind of jabs or crosses or straights or hooks or any kind of punch from any kind of odd angle, Romero saw a lot of them coming. A lot of the kicks he saw coming, and he blocked a lot of those. The leg kicks got through, the teeps got through to the gut, some body kicks got through, but that was really kind of about it. And that's not for a lack of effort. That was definitely demonstrated. So that was the first thing I saw. The second thing I saw was that Romero has two basic problems. Number one, he does not have a great gas tank, which we all know. That causes him to ration his offense, right? So here's the first question you have to ask yourself. Who rationed their offense the most? Pretty clearly, Romero rationed it. And the second part is he does not have great control skills, either control skills to when he grabs someone to hold on to them. You actually saw a little bit of that in the Whitaker fights as well. But the other part is, why was he running into Adesanya with a takedown attempt? Maybe he gets it, lands a couple of punches, and then he's gone, or Adesanya's gone. It's because he actually can't control him, and he actually can't cage cut very well. Numerous times, he just lets Adesanya retake center without any challenge whatsoever, which is just negligent. It's frankly negligent to do that. But if you don't have the skills to corner a guy, you don't have the energy to kind of stay in his face, maybe with wrestling attempts or more consistent offense. If you're just adopting a defensive posture with very little offense to account for it, while the other guy might be having his attacks stifled, one guy was consistently trying. The narrative coming out that this was two counter strikers who didn't want to throw in each other is just matter-of-factly and demonstrably not true. It's not true. So if Adesanya wants some blame because maybe he could have done a little bit more or his attacks weren't sophisticated enough, fine, you can say that. But there's one person who was consistently applying offense and one who wasn't. And the answer of the former is Israel Adesanya.
And if I'm playing devil's advocate, because I don't agree with this, but this is what the theory that a lot of people are pushing out there is, Israel Adesanya is the guy that called for this fight. He's the guy that said, hey, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to Alex Volkanovski. Yoel Romero is what his trainer said, and he said he was going to make it look easy. Does any extra blame fall on him because he's the guy that called Yoel out for this fight, but then didn't sort of, and I don't agree with it myself, but didn't sort of put himself out there into dangerous territory to try and actually do what he said he might?
Yeah, if you want to say that pre-fight hype to sell fights didn't match the reality, and that's not a thing you should do if you would like to, have a reputation as somebody who can make those two worlds match. Sure, I suppose. That's what I wouldn't fight that very hard. I don't really read into the pre-fight stuff very much because even if you have, remember, there can be a number of situations. Talk to anyone who competes at any level for jiu-jitsu, for wrestling, for striking, for MMA. Talk to them and tell them and ask them, you ever been into a fight where beforehand you were certain about what you were going to be able to do? And maybe you did some of that, but a lot of it didn't happen, and you had to go to a plan B or a plan C or a plan D. And they're going to tell you all the time. It's probably happened a bunch of times. Sometimes you get a Tyson Fury who's like, I'm going to walk down Deontay Wilder. I'm going to knock him out. and no one believes him, and then he does it. Okay, well, just as many times you're going to get someone who says, I can do this, and they really think that. And they might say it for pre-fight hype, and then they get in there and are like, well, it's kind of hard. I mean, I'll give Romero credit. I think people who are defending Romero are doing it the wrong way. They're saying, oh, well, he's just as guilty and or innocent as Adesanya, which I don't think is the argument. The argument is no one has stopped Adesanya's striking from ever getting going in the way that Romero did. Now, the cost to that, as I mentioned, was he couldn't get his own offense going. Okay, that's the problem. But have you ever seen someone who parried his jabs away, down parry, side parry, who ever blocked all of his kicks from the head? I've never seen someone that good at stopping what he was doing. To me, that's the praise you give Romero, because he did a phenomenal job with that.
Do you, even though the fight's been, pretty much panned, do you think it's sort of a win for Israel, considering that, he went 5 rounds with Romero and he made it out much healthier than anyone Romero's, fought in a long time? When you look at guys like Costa, Whitaker, and Rockhold, win or lose, they didn't exactly make it out of those fights unscathed, and, suffered obviously some injuries that kept them sidelined afterwards.
Yeah, and even a fight like the Tim Kennedy fight, which is very controversial with all the stoppages.
Yep.
The fouls and everything. And I know Tim lost that, although there was parts of it where he was winning, and we all know the story. That was another brutal fight, man. It was a super brutal fight. Went back and I watched that one too. I mean, yes and no, right? On the one hand, yes. Like, you have a choice to make. You can fight like Whitaker and you might win, but then you're going to end up in a situation where you might have taken, perhaps, I think the jury's still out on this a little bit, but perhaps irreparable career damage, and you'll get tons of applause for it. Or you can go and you can get booed and you can beat the guy and you can get out of there with maybe a bump here and a scrape there, which is frankly kind of unheard of. And there might be some boos along the way. Which one are you going to choose? And so you can say he chose the sort of the second one. Again, I think it's a little bit unfair because he was trying to pick the lock and he just couldn't get any momentum going. But okay, fine. I won't fight that too much in that particular framing. So yeah, sure. I think in that sense, it's a win. On the other hand, there probably is a little bit of a loss in terms of his temporary stock. I don't think it's permanent. I'm not even saying I necessarily agree with the stock drop, but in fact, it's kind of funny, dude. It's echoes of the Silva fight all over again. Now, that was a better fight, certainly a shorter fight too, but that was afterwards. Remember everyone coming out and being like, Adesanya is overrated. He's not that good, blah, blah, blah. And I kept thinking to myself, did we watch the same fight where what he was trying? I mean, again, people are like, oh, when I do break down fights, like, oh, you think you're an expert? No, I don't. I think I'm fight literate. I don't think I'm an expert. Which is why when Adesanya fights, dude, it takes me 10, 12 times to like take notes meticulously and then put it all together and then rewatch and then take more notes. And I begin to pick up on things. He's the only fighter I really have to do that for. I don't have to do that for hardly anybody else. And that should tell you something, which you see a lot about that in this fight as well. Listen to the commentary, right? When the commentary is going on, Daniel Cormier knows more than me. Joe Rogan probably does as well. And certainly John Anik is a fight literate person as well. They're all talking about the things that have nothing to do with what Adesanya is doing, because what Adesanya does is so sophisticated and it's so advanced, it's hard to process in real time. And if you don't go back and review it and then begin to pick apart the details, you'll kind of miss the forest for the trees on it a little bit. I think that's kind of happening here a little bit too. Again, a lot less effective than he was against Silva. A longer fight, kind of a letdown given some of the pre-fight rhetoric, fair enough. And remember, like Silva and Adesanya kind of saved the day when the Gastelum and the Whitaker fight fell out. So it's a lot of different circumstances. I'm merely pointing out the weird part about this is his stock dropped probably because it was an entertaining fight and he promised one. He had the big ESPN cover story. Yeah, okay. I think if he has an exciting fight against Costa, all that will change. So I don't really look into it too much. The only thing that I thought was kind of weird was when people were like, you know what, we got to dial it back. I'm like, my guys, he's had 8 fights. In 6 of them, he's won some kind of performance award, and one of them was a fight of the year winner / contender. He just won an award in New Zealand as a combat athlete that combat athletes don't win down there. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, it's just really bizarre, these echoes of if he doesn't go in there and just blow the fucking doors off somebody, then all of a sudden, well, he's really not that great. The things that help him knock out the Robert Whitakers, it's the same kind of thought process that goes into, unfortunately, a lackluster, from an entertainment standpoint, fight against Yoel Romero. But the ability, it's not gone down. I don't really understand some of those.
Do you think it's going to be kind of like, say, the Jones-Gustafsson fight, where like when that happened, people say, oh man, Jones fell off, oh this and that, and then over time people just see it as, oh yeah, Jones beat Gustafsson, and they kind of forget some of the the specifics of the fight. Anderson Silva obviously had the bad fight against Damian Maia, but then 2 fights later knocked out Vitor Belfort, and everyone was sort of back on the bandwagon. Years from now, when people look at Israel's resume and legacy, do you think they'll kind of forget how this fight was and just say, hey, yeah, he owns a win over Romero, one of the toughest guys in the division?
Provided he keeps winning, yeah. I think they'll just look. I mean, again, Silva has a number of these. Folks forget that the Cote fight sucked.
Yeah.
Up until, unfortunately, Cote got injured and then it stopped. So you're like, well, at least it didn't go a full 5 rounds, but that fight sucked. You're like, oh, my God. And the Lighties fight sucked. And then the Maia fight sucked. Like, he had this brilliant run where he beat Rich Franklin twice, and then he choked out Dan Henderson, and he demolished Chris Lieben, and he beat Travis Lutter, and he beat Nate Marquardt. And you were like, wow, man. Anderson Silva can do no wrong. And then he has this long stretch where he was winning, but it was like the Patrick Cote fight was kind of weird. The Taos Lighties fight was kind of weird. Then he rebounds against Forrest Griffin. You're like, okay, here it is. We're back in business. And then he has the Maia fight, and that one sucked. And I forget what came after that one. He fought Okami or someone else after that. But he had this really amazing period that set everyone up. And then when he had a couple of bad fights, people were saying he couldn't be a star. He had the Sonnen fight. The Sonnen fight, too, where, he had this incredible comeback. But he had periods where people would just ascribe these like really weird narratives to him. So if he goes out there and he beats Costa, I think it would make it all go away. But it's something you brought up about the Jones fight. I've seen people say after this one too, like, oh, he would never do well against Jon Jones now. Like, what on earth would make you say that? He did better against Yoel Romero in terms of wrestling than maybe anybody who's ever fought him. I mean, that's a silly thing to say. And then on top of it, yes, I think I would make Jon Jones the favorite to win that. I mean, Jon Jones is Jon Jones after all. But Jon Jones hasn't fought a guy with an 80-inch reach since, I think, Ovince St. Preux. And Ovince St. Preux ain't the striker that first of all, that Adesanya is, and certainly not the talent overall. And then also, you can make a case that Jon Jones lost his last 2 fights. I think he did lose his last fight. So again, if you came into the fight with at 248 thinking, I want to see something from Izzy that will spectacularly change my mind, of course you probably didn't get it. But if you were kind of thinking that it might be competitive, or that you were thinking he might be the guy, and this fight told you it wouldn't, what would it be? I literally don't know. That he is deliberate about his offense, and he can find a way to win, and he can shut down the wrestling in a way that hardly anyone has against Romero. That's the reason you would dial it back? That doesn't sound like a very good reason to do it, if you ask me.
Absolutely. And if anything, you could take away some stuff from that Israel performance that could actually build the case for the fact that he might have more success against Jon Jones than what people thought. So that's a really good point there. And you mentioned it. I mean, Anderson Silva had some pretty crazy defenses, but over here you got guys like Cannonier, possibly Darren Till, maybe Robert Whittaker comes back. You never know what's going on with Calvin Gastelum. And of course, Paulo Costa coming up next. Who do you think will be the toughest matchup for Israel Adesanya? It's kind of like a murderer's row when it looks like it's. I don't want to say it's at the level that Jon Jones was fighting some of these legends earlier on in his run, but arguably this could be at one of the toughest stretches that a champion has had in terms of defending a title in quite some time.
Well, it's the kind of run where if he can stay on the winning side of things, it'll just be legendary, right? I mean, that's what he's up against here. It's like, that's how difficult it is. But if he keeps being who we think he might be, because we don't know, he has to prove it, that'll be the kind of run you look back on. You say, wow, he beat all those guys in that 2-year time frame. And then as champion, he beat all of these. Like, holy shit, that's just going to be totally remarkable. I would actually say, to me, the Till one remains interesting because of his size. Southpaw could get in Adesanya's face. Like, the Gastelum fight didn't tell me enough, other than there's reasons for optimism. But it's not saying he is or he isn't. Jury's still out in the Till case for me. Robert Whittaker, again, still an open sort of question about what or where he's going to go with all of this. Cannonier, I don't necessarily see as that guy. I mean, anybody can land a bomb and win. He's got heavy hands, so maybe, but I don't see him as the biggest threat. I'll be honest with you. I actually see Paulo Costa, maybe as a bigger threat than Jones. Now, let me explain what that means. That doesn't mean what I am saying is I think Boashinha is a better fighter than Jones. He is not a better fighter than Jones. I mean, in every way, he's not a better fighter than Jones. But he's in an interesting spot in his career right now. Look at Bohashinya's numbers. Strikes landed per minute, strikes attempted per minute. He has landed per minute 8+. okay, which is extremely high. I think Jones is in like the 2 or the 3 range, right? Not very high. I think Adesanya is sub 4. However, his strikes absorbed are 6+. So he dishes out a tremendous amount of punishment, and he absorbs it. So here's what I can tell about this guy. He's not built for the long haul. I don't think he's going to have as long and illustrious a career as Adesanya, because he's just not fighting in a way that tells you that that's what's going to happen. But the difference is he's only got 13 fights in his career. He stopped everybody he's fought in the UFC except who? Romero, because he fought and stopped Uriah Hall and Gareth McClellan and Johnny Hendricks and all those guys. He's only 13 fights deep into his career. He's 28 years old. And, yeah, I don't think he's overall as talented as Izzy. I would probably favor Izzy to win. But in terms of a guy who's going to take all the risk, who has all of the punishment to dish out, who is, built like a brick shit house, who is a heavy power puncher. I mean, everything you want to say about him, he's in a point now where that fight style, it could be a liability fight to fight, but he doesn't have the wear and tear where it's going to really undercut him later in his career. It's still now that kind of thing where it's a little Justin Gaethje-ish, right? Only a little bit more polished, because even Gaethje has a negative differential, not a +2 positive differential. So to me, Jon Jones is the opposite of that, right? Bohashinia has like a super slow, or a short 72, 73-inch reach. That's a great advantage for Jon Jones, for Israel Adesanya. Jon Jones is the opposite, right? Have a 4-inch reach advantage. Jon Jones is judicious with his offense and very, very good with his defense. Bohashinia is the exact opposite. Both Jon Jones and Izzy have fight IQ, which means they're going to make careful decisions over the course of 5 rounds. Bohashinia is just foot on the gas pedal at all times, no matter what, go. And so, while one guy might have more liability than the other, I think he is uniquely more dangerous than the other, especially in the first 2, perhaps 3 rounds. And so for those reasons, while Jon Jones is in every way a much more accomplished and better fighter, the particular nature of the challenge of Bohashinia, I take very seriously, and I'm sure that they do over there at City Kickboxing as well.
And he just knocked out Logan Paul the other day, so that's another feather in his cap.
Wasn't that staged? That looked like the dumbest shit ever, right?
I mean, no one would just be taking concussions like that for fun, right?
Well, yeah. He ran
guy
at Paulo Costa as well, and he was trying to hit him and stuff. So you could totally see how it played out, but I don't know. I'm with you, Luke. It looked a bit funny.
Yeah, I mean, the wrestling looked pretty good, and that was fine. But it was like, do I really believe that the guy? Well, you know what? Maybe I do. The guy who posts a video of the dude hanging in the tree without thinking twice about it, maybe he is dumb enough to go and get concussed by Bohashinia. I don't know.
I'll tell you what. It was just like that Bohashinia concussion. This was a very educational experience for us, Luke. Thank you so much for coming on to Submission Radio. We won't be greedy with your time, of course. You can follow the man at L Thomas News. On Twitter, Morning Combat airs every Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern /9 a.m. Pacific. That's Tuesday here in Australia. The Luke Thomas live chat. The Luke Thomas Show on SiriusXM is now also available worldwide. And I'm loving this, by the way, Luke. On Apple Podcasts and Pandora, selected highlights, not the full show. I check it out on Stitcher myself, and I absolutely love being able to check out your show here in Australia. I know there's a lot of Aussies who appreciate it as well. If you guys haven't jumped on it, make sure to subscribe now. It's always an honor and a pleasure having you on the program, man. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you, fellas. Find some toilet paper. Good luck.
Hey, this is Tony Okagui Ferguson, and you guys listen to Submission Radio. Keep tuning in, guys.
All right, guys. Well, this is a very, very special treat. It's been a while since we've spoken to this man, and you know him from his impressive MMA career, being one of the top guys in WEC, Strikeforce, and the UFC. A real-life superhero, this man is one of the few fighters to simultaneously serve in the U.S. Army while also fighting professionally. You also know him from his shows such as Hunting Hitler and Hard to Kill. It's a pleasure to welcome back the man himself, Tim Kennedy, and look at him back to the program. Tim, it's been too long. You stopped writing. You stopped calling. No Christmas cards. It feels like it's been too long.
It has been too long. I'm so sorry. But I get a lot of pots on the fire that I'm moving all the time.
Dude, it's so many pots, man. I know that obviously you've been super busy. We see you just completed a short film, and then you're going to be in a movie called Country. We see you've been overseas training tactics. What has life been like for you since retirement?
Pretty entrepreneurial. Mm-hmm. So I own like a little over half a dozen companies.
Oh, wow.
Like 7 of them, and I own flat out like 4 of them. So, like lots of HR and finance meetings with CFAs and anyways. So like business crap, and still military stuff, writing a book. Life's crazy and good.
Dude, that's crazy. I can't imagine going into an office and being in HR and then Tim Kennedy comes walking in going, "Hey guys, what's going on? I'm going to sort this disagreement out for you guys right now." But I was going to say, you mentioned
come into my office. They're like, so did you really seriously cover yourself in pig blood and then show up to the office? And I was like, well, I didn't like intentionally cover myself in pig blood. I had killed a pig, and that pig's blood had gotten on me, and I was running late, so I just came into the office.
It was
but
the
we had a
pig's
shower.
fault, really. Yeah.
Yeah, totally was.
It's like, I will take that lower offer that you presented me to take the job. I will not negotiate, Tim. That's okay. But I was going to say, man, you mentioned the U.S. Army and the fact that you've been going overseas, and we saw some of the social media posts, obviously so many interesting photos and a lot of great captions that you put up. I know you can't really share what you're really doing over there, but what's that been like? What can you say about the experiences that you've had overseas? Because I remember you've told us some crazy stories in the past about some crazy situations that you've been in overseas, and it doesn't look like things are slowing down.
No, nothing changes. Yeah. So I was in Northwest Africa. I was doing a FID mission, Foreign Internal Defense. That's where you go and you help a government in a developing world learn how to do like first world things. Mm-hmm. So like a military to act like a real grown-up military, like treating the soldiers nicely, not like beating them to death or killing them if they do a wrong thing. Making sure that the government and militaries have like an appropriate separation, and you're teaching them, some very basic tactics so they can do their job well. It's a weird thing for people to wrap their head around. The America is everywhere, like in other people's business. No, but in a way, kind of. The more stable of a world we live in, the better opportunity it is for America to thrive and for other countries to kind of like succeed in this American dream. So what we like to see is countries that have been struggling with terrorism or human trafficking, drug smuggling. Like, we don't want those nefarious acts happening. We want a nice, stable region. A stable region means that we can, as a capitalistic nation that we are, like work with that country with their imports and exports. So in the big picture, a stable, healthy world is like good for America. So that's what I'm trying to do,
Yeah, gotcha. I know that like going to so many different countries where things sort of work differently, you must be in some pretty dicey situations from time to time. I don't know if you're capable of fear, Tim, just given your history, fighting in the cage, serving in the army, but I'm just wondering, have there been any situations recently where you're like, oh wow, this is when was the last time you feared for yourself, if that's even possible?
Yeah. No. So like my soul, whatever it is, that thing in your brain that tells you that you should be scared right now, that thing is dead.
Oh.
Yeah. My soul and that thing in my brain have that in common.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like there's definitely moments where, like I'm driving through essentially the Sahara, and I have like 3 Africans in the back of my truck, an African inside of my truck. And I don't know any of these Africans, and they're kind of like looking at me and be like, I wonder how much money this dude has. And I'm like looking at them. I'm like, I wonder how many guns they have. And, it's, I'm like, why don't you just roll your window down a little bit and I'll turn the air conditioning on so I don't have to smell you as bad as I'm smelling you now. And while they do that, I'm kind of taking a little peek and see what kind of weapons they have, see what we've got going on here.
So you're sizing them up as you're driving.
Oh, hell yeah. All the time, Profiling saves lives. Anyways, so there have been a bunch of times where I've just kind of like taken a moment and looked around, being like, man, I'm the only white dude here. I'm like the only white dude here for like 100 miles. Like, this is, I don't know if this is a good idea, but it's not like fear. It's more of like this realization that like, I might have to boot scoop boogaloo if something goes bad here in a minute. So I'm just going to get all my ducks in order. I'm going to cross my T's. I'm going to dot my I's. I'm going to go ahead and put an extra round in the magazine because, you just don't know what's going to happen.
Well, I mean, it must be a crazy feeling because you're there on business, right? You're basically working. And I know you're a very capable man. So you're probably looking at it from a very, analytical kind of perspective. Like, I'm going to do this. But is there ever a moment where you're like, oh, man, like this might be it. This might be a pretty big situation if things go wrong.
Yeah, but it's normally self-induced. So I was off the coast of Mauritania and I was doing a little swim. And so kind of where the waves crash, you swim about 20 to 30 meters past that. So you're just past how the waves are swelling. So as you're doing this open water swim, you're not getting beat in the head with all the waves. Well, African fishermen, they don't know how to swim. So they want to be as close to the shore as they can possibly be in their boats without ever capsizing the boats due to the waves. So the spot that I was swimming was also the spot that all the boats head up and down the coast. So I was just cruising along and I heard this thing, and I take a little peek over my shoulder as I was swimming and I was like, that's a boat. And it's coming straight at me. So do I swim into the waves? So I swam into the waves, and there was only one dude in the boat, and I think he was just going to to load bait lines, and the Chinese have just decimated the fishing industry off the coast of Africa because they do a bunch of long line offshore fishing because it's not really regulated, and they just destroy all the habitats. So these poor fishermen are just fighting tooth and nail for 2 fish a day, and there's fewer and fewer of them because there's fewer and fewer fish. But so I thought I was going to get run over and chopped to bits by the motor. And then after that boat passed, I was like, all right, I'm going to swim out a little bit further to make sure that I don't get hit by other boats because there are lots of boats going up and down. So I was actually going to have the boats on the inside towards the shore of me. And I swim in as much deeper water, maybe a quarter mile offshore. And I kicked something. And I don't know if it was probably a plastic water bottle. But of course, the first thing that goes in your mind is a megalodon just grabbed my leg. Right?
Of course.
So, yeah, a megalodon for sure. So I was wearing these tiny little Roca Speedos, and I had my glasses on. And then I fully shit myself in the Speedo. And so I'd move my Speedo out of the way so I could get all poop out. And then I had to swim back to shore because I was so scared. I thought I was done. So I was in that moment, almost getting chopped up by a boat and then being attacked by a megalodon in the middle of the ocean. That I realized I should probably be a little bit more responsible in my swimming and exercise technique.
There's the title for this video. Tim Kennedy recounts megalodon encounter.
Dude, I'll tell you what, Tim. Down here, it's hard to find toilet paper. I'd love to take you with me to the store and see if you can help me get some toilet paper with it. Similar to this fishing situation over here in Australia. But
I didn't have any toilet paper. I needed some. All I had was my Speedo.
I'll tell you what, man. Well, if there's a man that can survive without toilet paper, it's Tim Kennedy. Yeah. But we don't have these kind of tactical skills that you've picked up over the years, so it's a little bit difficult down here. But there's a lot of things that have changed, Tim, outside of obviously some of the crazy stuff that you've been doing, and that is, the world of MMA. First of all, we wanted to touch on your camp, Jackson Wink, man. We've seen this being some notable changes. Guys like Cowboy Cerrone, most recently, Diego Sanchez went to train with Josh Fabia. Cowboy Cerrone moved off and is sort of doing his own thing. There's a little bit of criticism about Coach Wink and Greg Jackson and stuff. I mean, what's your reaction to some of these criticisms and some of the negativity the gym's sort of had to deal with over the last, I suppose, couple of years?
Yeah, so they've been in it for a really long time. I have complete faith in Wink and Greg about not only how they are as businessmen and gym owners, but more importantly, what they are as coaches. And, it's a real, especially when you get up into the Cowboy success, because outside of Connor and Jon Jones, you'd be hard pressed to find a more successful fighter than Cowboy. And when you get up into that stratosphere of real success, you get to see kind of behind the picture of these mega fight camps and how they struggle to do business. So when you start, when you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a fight and, you're training at these gyms, are you still paying that little bit that the new fighters get to make, or is it now your responsibility to help ensure that gym and those coaches are successful? And so there's like a huge nuance, unclear, kind of ambiguous path about what that looks like and how that should look. And I think it's different for every school, from Duke Rufus to American Top Team to AK and Jackson's. It's I just trust in Mike and Winkeljohn and Greg, like, as people, and I think the rest will just kind of be figured out over time.
I mean, a guy that like yourself who trains, like you mentioned, some of these African forces overseas and has seen what you've seen. What do you make of this Josh Fabia guy, man? This guy, I don't know. We looked him up. He's done some training himself. He's got some very, I don't know, some thoughts on things. What do you think about this guy?
Charlatan. I mean, like, I'm not saying he's Charles Manson, but like, I think he is more akin to like a cult leader than he does like a legit tip of the spear MMA super fight team type coach. When you're looking at like Javier Mendez and Crazy Bob Cook and the Ben Askrens and America, like you just the litany of coaches out there that are amazing coaches, and then you got like that guy way out there, who's looking at you weird, and he's slowly licking a spoon. You're just like, I'm not gonna go with that guy. I'm gonna go with this like other dude here that has like super chunky ears that like competed at the highest level in wrestling, and he has this stable of incredible coaches that fought at the highest level. Like, maybe I'll go train over there, or I'll go over there with the dude licking the spoon.
What do you make of Diego being with this spoon-licking guy? It was an interesting decision by him.
Yeah.
From that camp.
So Diego's going to Diego, though, right? I mean, like, we have seen Diego do weirder things than this. Like Diego choosing to train with, like, a weirdo. That is not the weirdest thing that Diego has ever done. Let's be honest here.
I'm wondering, how often do you still train, like, at Jackson Winks, Tim? Because I know you got a crazy busy schedule. Do you duck in every now and then, sort of have a training session there?
Yeah, actually, I think we're going to go back for like a month in this spring, early summer. And I mean, I still train 2 times a day. I'm still like a 13 to 17 workout a week type guy.
Jesus.
So I had 2 sick training sessions today, an hour of kickboxing, an hour of grappling at Gracie Maida. So I'm still jacked, but like whatever.
I'll tell you what, yeah, man. Well, you go onto social media and it's like, yep, Tim is in better shape than he was when he was fighting. So he must be still working out. But I was going to ask you, man, obviously there's some changes in your old division, middleweight division. We just saw a fight between an old opponent of yours that you might remember called Yoel Romero and a young up-and-comer by the name of Israel Adesanya, UFC 248 main event. I'm just wondering, did you have a chance to see that fight, and what were your takeaways from it?
So I unfortunately did watch that fight. A couple of my takeaways was I was thrilled to see less amount of weird shenanigan, almost cheating type behavior from Yoel. So that was a sustain. I also was happy that he didn't there was no poop involved. Also a sustain. There was no like stool in any form like coming out of him or that he was sitting on that he wouldn't get off of. So that was also good. But then the rest of it was just like complete idiotic. I mean, that was one of the worst fights in MMA history. Maybe the worst. You'd have to go back to an Anderson Silva championship fight to maybe find a worse championship fight. What was that against? Patrick Cote? Which one was
Damian Maia?
Damian Maia. What a horrible fight. But there were still more punches in that fight than in this fight.
I'm wondering, Tim, like from your perspective, because everybody's asking the question of who gets the blame for this. Is it a case where, I mean, do you look at either man and feel like either man could have pressed the action more? Is there one more to blame than the other?
No, I think they're both equally to blame. Like the challenger needs to come in there and, not do this for like the first 3 minutes of the fight. I don't even know what this is. Like, is this like pre-Tyrannosaurus Rex hands? Like, what is that, Yoel? and then to have the audacity afterwards to like start throwing stones at your opponent. And both of them have been doing this nonstop. And like from Ariel Helwani to like the post-fight interview, they're like, oh, this guy was so jacked up. It was like, no, this guy was so jacked up. It's like, why don't you just both shut your face and say like, I had a plan. And like Yoel, hey, clearly he was trying to like bait Izzy into a fight. And he was like, I don't want to be baited into like playing a brawl with you. So I'm not going to do that. And Yoel should have been like, well, I had this plan and it didn't work and I didn't have a plan B. So what you guys got was a super horrible fight. And just be honest. Like the criticism would be over if that was his plan. He's like, hey, my best way to beat him was to try to lure him and bait him into this thing. And he didn't fall for the bait. So then I just looked like an idiot. Super sorry. I think another person that's to blame that hasn't really had much negative comments thrown their way was matchmaking. You take two super explosive counter strikers and you put them in a fight against each other, and then neither of them are initiating because both of them want to counter.
Apparently matchmakers didn't want to make the fight. Dana White was saying afterwards that they were just like, they kind of foresaw this and then, they made the fight anyway. Obviously Israel wanted that fight and Dana said, all right, let's do the fight.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't like the fight in the first place. The fact that Yoel Romero was fighting for a championship after coming off of losses and, being like a habitual cheater. And obviously I don't like him, so I probably don't have the most objective about this guy. Was that a dog?
Yeah, there's a submission radio dog, and he gets very upset sometimes. And I think he remembers the UFC 178 moment that you had six. Yoel Romero. I was going to ask him, with Yoel, he's lost 3 fights back-to-back, but you're the last person in his UFC run that really came close to stopping him. And even though it's been 6 years and it's UFC 178.
I didn't hear if you said that correct. You mean after I stopped him in the second round, he didn't answer the bell? Is that what you said?
That's right. I said exactly that. So let me ask you, though. No one's had that kind of success in the UFC. He's had losses on his record, but they've been debated. So let me ask you this. How does it feel to be like the guy that really put the beating on Yoel Romero and sort of stopped, quote unquote, like you mentioned, stopped him in that round before the whole Stoolgate thing happened?
Man, I wish I could run it back, If I could turn back time, I would. Leave him on that stool is what I do. No, I don't look back that way. Of course I wish I could go back and like change things and come out into the third round with the same focus as I had at the end of the second round instead of like celebrating and thinking the fight was over. But he's human. I don't know how people think he's not human. I put him on Queer Street with 4 punches and, he's an Olympic level wrestler that like couldn't do anything with a whole bunch of people on the ground. So I don't know where this pretty inaccurate perspective of how good he is. He's explosive, he's dangerous. And that's, I think, the extent of kind of his ability, in my opinion.
Is there, I know like we spoke to you many times after UFC 178. Is there a part of you that it's like, man, I wish that rematch happened, before you officially retired?
Yeah, for sure. I wish we could have run that fight back the very next fight. I think I was supposed to fight Rashad next at Madison Square Gardens on New Year's Eve. No. Anyways,
it was November. It was November 2016.
Yeah.
The Connor card.
Yeah. When that fight fell through, I was like begging and pleading. Joe Silva was still around at the time, being like, Joe, listen, let me tell you what I'll do. And I'll do some really grotesque things right now to you. You let me fight Yoel. And he's like, well, I think Yoel can't make weight. I was like, please.
Well, man, that Joe Silva, he's a man of character, because knocking back an offer like that, geez, Louise, from Tim Kennedy, what a man of character. But you are retired now. You mentioned you saw the fight and it was a bit frustrating. Could it be enough to lure you back for one more fight, Tim? Do you think if the UFC was like, hey, Tim, we got this man, Yoel Romero, and there's this rematch here, would that be enough for you to consider coming back, especially with the fact that you're training 20 times a day. Seemingly better shape than before.
Well, it's really easy to be in like really healthy, good shape when you're not taking like the amount of abuse that fighters put their bodies through. So like, I mean, just truth. I'm faster and stronger than I've ever been in my whole entire life. And I think a lot of that has to do with me not like pounding my body every single day in a negative way, preparing for a fight. Coming back to fight Yoel Romero, like, hey, that'd be super fun. And, you know, like he's 40, whatever. Let me show you what this 40, whatever looks like to that guy. But no, I have too many awesome things in my life right now that I would want to come back for fighting. I still have the competition itch, which I kind of scratch with like grappling fights and judo stuff. And while I was in Africa, I was competing in Senegalese wrestling, which is like super fun.
Oh, yeah.
I was sarcastic at the fun part. It's like 300-pound black dudes that are like picking me up and shaking me like a child and throwing me through the air. It's pretty humiliating.
What's not to love about that?
Yeah, I don't know. Just wish I was bigger and stronger and more African.
Yeah. It's good. I'm glad you clarified the retirement thing, because, you know, retirement MMA is a very fickle thing. It never seems to last. So it's good that at least, you know, you've got a lot of other endeavors and things to keep you busy. But I am just curious, outside of this fight against Romero, what do you think of Israel Adesanya as the champ and sort of what he's been able to do in such a remarkably short amount of time in the UFC?
He is talented for sure. Yeah, he's a talented counter striker. He's very, very good at kind of like dictating range. I also think that he has been given some pretty favorable matchups stylistically. And when you look at the kind of next wave of guys that are, I mean, the number one contender, the Freddie Mercury style copier. Did you see that at the fights?
Is that Paulo Costa?
Yeah.
Is that based on his shirt?
Yeah, well, and the makeup. I mean, the whole thing was like total Freddie Mercury from Queen. I was like, "You look fantastic, sweetheart, fantastic." You know, but I mean, I like that's a tough fight for him stylistically, and like I don't know how he's going to be able to dictate range with a dude that essentially is a jacked pit bull that's, you know, a 250-pound middleweight. That's going to be.
Do you think that's a tougher fight stylistically than Yoel Romero? Because I know that Israel feels like because Paulo will come forward, he'll be able to counter him, you know, a lot better, and it'll be a much more action-packed fight.
Well, it will be more action-packed. The Paulo Costa has a pretty tough chin, and I was using the pit bull like bulldog reference because like that's how he fights. And I'm not sure if you've like ever fought a pit bull, but it sucks. And like if you hit it in the mouth really hard, it doesn't really change what the pit bull is going to do. Like the pit bull is still going to be a pit bull.
Oh, nice.
And so like if you don't put him to sleep in those first couple of punches coming in, then you're in for a tussle with the dude that is stronger and better than you in the clinch and on the ground. So yeah, yes, I think it sets up for an easier, more exciting fight in the sense that you're going to see some cool strikes. It's also going to be a bigger battle and a harder fight for everyone else.
Do you reckon that's sort of like the toughest test for him in the division? You got guys like Darren Till, guys like Jared Cannonier is another guy that's coming up through the ranks that people expect to be, you know, a pretty interesting fight for Israel as well.
I mean, that division is still stacked. It's kind of confusing. Like I'm not sold on Darren Till at a 185 yet. He has one fight there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of premature to be like, all right, this guy's like a legitimate contender. You know, and talking about super fights with Jon Jones, like you should probably not be saying that right now and for a while until you have like a pretty decisive few title defenses against legitimate contenders, not dudes that are on losing streaks that stand in front of you out of striking range for 25 minutes. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you bring that up because that is sort of everybody's talking about this Jon Jones fight when it comes to Israel Adesanya. I guess Jon Jones sees it as a great way to make a big money paycheck because there's a lot of guys sort of gone from his division. Israel sees it as a big legacy fight. You mentioned it just before in your answer, but how do you see that fight going if those guys did match up against each other? You know Jon quite well. You've trained with him for quite some time. How would you see that matchup playing out?
Jon would murder him. I mean, like, maybe 2 rounds before you see a TKO from elbows on the ground.
Do you think it's okay? Do you think that Jon would be able to get him on the feet, or do you think it'd be a case where he would have to take him down on the ground? Because we see Jon Jones obviously wanting to stand with some of the best strikers, guys like Santos, guys like, Dominic Reyes.
Yeah, it's weird that he does that against such a good striker, because you see what he does to dudes on the ground. And I really think that Jon could win that fight anywhere in the clinch, in an exciting TKO KO fashion from distance with some pretty tricky strikes. But where I really see it being a dominant fight is if that fight, and Jon is a fantastic wrestler, goes to the ground. I don't see Jon letting him back up again.
It's very fascinating. Let me ask you this about Jon. There's been a lot of criticism about some of his performances. Santos, Reyes, people have been very critical. They're sort of saying Jon Jones is not the fighter that he was once. And quite a lot of people believe that he lost that Santos and Reyes fight. So what do you make of this sort of criticism that the champ's dealing with right now?
I mean, well deserved. I'm hoping, when he was like that hungry young lion and his personal life wasn't bleeding over in his professional life, you saw a ferocious Mike Tyson-like thing, right? And then success came along, and so did money and fame and bad decisions and DUIs and bribes and coke and strippers and with that, like, I'm not saying correlations causation, but you have definitely seen a decline in performance, or the really large exclamation mark in how a fight is viewed while those kind of life decisions are happening. So the technique, the talent, the skill is still in that fighter of Jon Jones. And for all contenders, I hope you all pray that his life is still a disaster, because if he gets his life in order, like, that dude's going to be unstoppable.
Jeez. Imagine Jan Blachowicz just praying at night. Oh, I hope Jon Jones does something bad this weekend. So.
Yeah, seriously. He's like, all right, if Jon goes to the strip club, I need somebody to sneak in a kilo of coke, and I mean the good stuff, from Medellin, because that just put it on Jon's table for free. Who will do that for me? I got $1 million.
Yeah, just Jan in a wig.
Tim's like, I'm in a third world country. I can have that in an hour.
I can facilitate that, by the way. But let me just quickly, as we wrap up on Jon, did you notice any kind of different when you trained with him and you were in the gym? He obviously went through a lot of highs and lows, and we saw those in his performances. But did you notice any differences with the Jon that you sort of dealt with on a daily basis when you guys were training partners?
Man, when he's right, I hated training with him because he was so dominant, and then when he was off, like, if he had a night where he went out, I was like, I could smell it. You could smell the booze, you could smell the weed, or you could smell. You like, as an athlete, like, when you start sweating, all those things come out. And when I would smell that, I would be like, all right, today's my day. I'm gonna get his back, or let's I'm gonna push the pace. With the 4th, 5th minute of these rounds, he's gonna deal with a more aggressive version. So
did it make much of a difference? Was it enough to sort of, get a bit of an edge over him, or was it still just absolute pain?
Well, I mean, it's always absolute pain, but there's I got my best looks on nights that he was looking or days after he had nights where he was being his worst.
All right, Tim. Well, listen, we love catching up with you, but before we go, we know you got a bunch of projects coming up. There's a couple of movies. I know you've just finished a short film. You've got another film coming up that you'll be shooting, and obviously all the stuff that you're doing with your companies. What can you sort of share with us? What could all the Tim Kennedy fans, look out for? I know You've got In Country coming up next, so that's going to be exciting to see that movie. You've got the short film. You've got you always have TV shows and things happening as well. So what's happening that people need to check out?
I'm almost done with a book, and
is that going to be about your MMA run, or is that going to be focused on the outside stuff?
It's like me taking my clothes off, all of it, walking into the Pacific Ocean and swimming out into the fog, maybe thinking about killing myself when I have a couple of women pregnant and I just crashed my motorcycle. 9/11 just happened, and I think I have AIDS. This is a true story. And yeah. And me swimming out until I can't figure out which direction a shore is, and I think I'm going to die. And this is like not the worst day of my life.
This was Tuesday of last week.
So the book is everything, but mostly bad decisions with like self-deprecating humor. Mm-hmm. From getting blown up in Afghanistan to long gunfights to killing the number 2 terrorist on the planet to fighting for 2 world titles and losing them. It's all in there.
When is the book coming out? Because we're already excited for it.
Well, probably like 6 months from a final product. Mm-hmm. Like we have it all there because it was just in my head and we had to put it on paper. And then it's taking that and putting it into, because some of it is so unbelievable that we have to support it with contextual information. Otherwise, there's no way that people are going to believe that, like, wait a second. So you got blown up. You're in a 3-day gunfight. You had just shit yourself, and you wake up underneath the Humvee, and that is halfway through halfway through the 6-day gunfight. And it's like, Jeez. Yes, that is all correct. So we have to put in a timeline in a chronological way, other stuff. So you realize that this really was my life.
Jeez, imagine being the editor of that book and reading some of those stories and be like, listen, Tim, I have a family. We can't put this story out. So
those were conversations. You're like, hey, is it okay that we tell people that your dad stole a plane full of cocaine from Pablo Escobar? And I was like, Pablo's dead, bro. We can totally do this. You're like, well, can we ask your dad? I'm like, I don't know. You can ask my dad. I'm putting it in the book.
You're like, I'm Tim Kennedy. I'm in HR. I say it's approved.
Well, there you guys go. When he's not one of the biggest HR professionals in the world, he's out there making a difference. Make sure to check Tim out on social media for his latest projects at Tim Kennedy MMA on Twitter and Instagram. Tim, we could talk to you all day, man. Thank you so much for coming onto the program. It's always an honor speaking with you, and let's not leave it so long next time. There's definitely a lot of stuff to talk about every time you come on.
Sounds good, gentlemen.
Thanks.
God bless.
Yep. This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is making his first appearance on the program. We've spoken to him in person, but not on the official show. He is riding a 3-fight win streak in the UFC's middleweight division. One of the scariest, but also one of the nicest guys in the division. Obviously knocking on the door of a title shot. Jared Cannonier, the killer gorilla himself. Welcome to the program, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem, man. I appreciate you guys having me on. And
we are. Well, I was going to say we're very excited to have you on the show, man, for the first time. So it's a bit of a history-making appearance here. And first of all, we have to find out, how are you feeling? Because we know you had some surgery to fix a torn left pec. How's it feeling right now? And how did the surgery go?
Well, I am officially on the road to recovery. 3 weeks today, post-operation. Started physical therapy last week. So it's going to be a slow process, but, I know I can make it. My therapist, the surgeon, everybody has assured me that I'll be able to make a 100% recovery. So it's just a matter of time now.
I was just wondering, man, I guess we never really found out. How did you tear that pec?
I was training jiu-jitsu. I was at the hotel in Houston before Jones fought Reyes, and I was, trying to get some training in, trying to stay in shape, getting ready for a fight that I thought I had back on this past weekend. But I was passing Ben's guard, and something I do all the time, and I passed his guard, and then I went to activate and get strong to collect them up into side control, and then as I activated my as I activated my pec, it tore on me. So that's how it happened. Doing something I've done a million times.
Unbelievable. You're too strong for your own good, Jared.
I guess that's what it is, right? I was just flexing too hard.
How tough was that for you, man? Like, here you are knocking on the door of a title shot, arguably maybe one fight away, and then this happens. You're in the prime of your career. How tough was that for you? And I know you mentioned at the start of the interview that you will make 100% recovery. Was there a fear in your mind at any point, like, oh man, this could be a pretty big injury? Will I be the same?
I'm definitely aware of the possibility that it could change or alter, you know what I'm saying, or anything like that. Especially at the onset of it, I wasn't too happy, at the moment it happened, but, I had to collect myself and not really focus on the negative, I understood that I just injured myself, and I just had to go into a sort of mode of thinking that, will facilitate healing, I suppose.
Jared, just quick. Sorry, I was just going to say, before we go any further, any chance we could get the camera just a little bit further away? I'm pretty sure I saw you wearing a sweet shirt, and I want everybody to see it. Just sort of perfect. There it is. Yeah. Awesome. Go on.
About right there?
Yeah, that's perfect. Absolutely perfect.
All right. So, it happened, freak accident, but it's all good, Again, my doctors reassured me that I'll be able to make 100% recovery, which is a huge weight off of my chest, So they gave me about 5 to 6 months. And, in the meantime, I'll be working on other things until I can get back in there and train completely. But I'm still in there. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still here. So, it's only, again, hopefully I'll be able to fight once, maybe twice. This year, hopefully. We'll see.
Take us into that. I mean, it must have been an incredibly frustrating few months for you. So take us into it from your perspective, because we've kind of seen it on paper. You were supposed to fight at UFC 248. Obviously, Robert Whittaker had to pull out. He had some very serious personal issues. Then it looked like Darren Till was going to fight. And then obviously you tear your pec. Before that, you're back up for another fight, and you have to go through that whole process again. So take us into the whole scenario from the beginning. Take us from when you confirmed to fight Robert Whittaker, and then that fight falls off. How was the process from then on, and what was really happening behind the scenes?
Yeah. So, we're scheduled to fight Rob, and, his whole circumstance unfolded, so he wasn't able to fight. And that's when they, offered me Darren Till, and I accepted immediately. But I guess either he was doing, either Darren was thinking about taking the fight, or, doing contract issues, or doing something, whatever the case was. Whatever it was, we were waiting for him to say yes. It was like a number of weeks, I think 2-3 weeks prior to the injury. We were waiting for him to say yes. And, nothing. And then 2 days after I tear my pec, he comes on, Instagram and Twitter saying, yeah, he's ready to take the fight. Let's do it. So I don't know.
Do you think it was because you tore your pec that he sort of accepted?
I don't know. Maybe he had his agents out there, relaying information, and I don't know. I'm not going to speculate or anything like that. But it was kind of funny the way it happened. 2 days after I tear my pec, he accepts the fight. So, he waited a little too bit, waited a little too long. So.
What about, I mean, you broke it down for us, but take us into your mindset. I mean, that must be an incredibly frustrating time. Like Casper mentioned, you're in the prime of your career. You're training for a guy that you don't know is going to be signing on the dotted line, and then the injury happens. What was your mentality like, and how did you sort of keep going through it all? A lot of people would be so frustrated having to deal with this kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, again, I don't get, I'm not driven by my emotions. So as frustrating as the situation may be, I may have gotten a little frustrated, but I didn't really dwell on the frustration too long. Again, I was, I felt that that dread And, I felt the sting of the injury bug at the moment, at the moment of the injury. But later on that day, I went to the fights, and I got to watch Jon Jones and Reyes fight. So I wasn't sitting there dwelling on, the boo-boo that I had. I knew that I was going to get taken care of. I knew that I was able to get it healed or repaired, whether it required surgery or anything, you know what I'm saying? It was just a matter of figuring out what was wrong and what to do next at that point. So, no, I didn't really dwell on it, get frustrated by it or anything like that. As frustrating as it was, and every time somebody found out about it, they relived that same dread all over again. And that's not something that I want. I don't want to have to experience this all over again, over and over, and be reminded of how bad a situation it is, because for me, it's just, I don't, I can see the silver lining out of it. You know what I'm saying? Now I have a lot of time to sit here and work on my mental game, think about other things that I can work on, watch it from the outside and see what type of, and apply it to my game, apply it to the experiences that I've already had. So, there's ways I can benefit from it. As shitty a situation as it is, I would have loved to have fought this past weekend. Again, as shitty as the situation it is what it is. I'm not going to sit here and dwell on how shitty it is. I'm going to dwell on how can I benefit from it. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to do, take a situation like this and say, this is what I'm going to do to benefit from it. They usually figure that out in hindsight. But I like the way Israel says it. He says, I'm player one. You know what I'm saying? He said, I'm the one with the controller in my hand. I guess you can say the way I want to approach my life and my experiences is sort of the same way. I want to be completely present for it, see it from many different perspectives, not just from the driver's seat, you know what I'm saying? Even though I'm just sitting in the driver's seat physically, I want to be able to use my mind and my imagination to be able to experience it from different perspectives. So that way, you'd be able to gain double, triple, maybe even quadruple the amount of knowledge and experience you can gain from one instance in time.
Well, it's very motivational, man. Just quickly on Darren, you and him have a bit of an interesting relationship. I don't know what you guys are outside of what we've seen on social media, but he likes to sort of comment on your Instagram from time to time, and he likes to kind of he likes to keep bringing up the fact that the nickname is on the line if you guys do fight. What do you make of this relationship that you guys have on social and this kind of nickname versus nickname perception that he likes to put out if you guys get it on?
I think I was the killer gorilla before he was the gorilla, so he can kiss my ass about changing names and stuff like that. On top of that, you know what I'm saying, before if he needs that for motivation, he can have that. He can do that himself, play out the scenario however he needs to. But at the end of the day, you know what I'm saying, the fight's a fight. Names are just words. So what we're fighting for is something bigger than the name, I feel. We're trying to get that title, trying to cement whatever name you want to, whatever name I choose for you guys to call me, cement that there in legacy or in history or whatever, however the hell they say it. Lord, would you move? So, but Darren is a funny guy on the social media. I don't really do the social media too much. You won't see me posting and doing most of that. You know what I'm saying? Mostly during fight week, I do some posting and, for what's the thing called? Sponsorships and stuff like that. I do posting, but Darren, he be on the social media posting and saying Jared ? I guess I don't know what that means. Jared ? Jared what? What's the question? Like, do I want to fight? You know what I'm saying? I already signed. I already said yes. So now you're gonna have to wait. But Darren likes to troll people, is what they do. I guess that's what the kids are doing nowadays on the social media. They're trolling everybody, just doing something completely ignorant and stupid, saying whatever comes to mind, which is usually something stupid or ignorant to get a rise out of people, a reaction out of people. But I'm a grown ass man. I'm gonna sit here and laugh at the dumb shit and acknowledge the real shit. So You won't see me acknowledging any of that dumb shit. So.
I'm wondering how you sort of, potentially saw yourself matching out with Darren or that fight going, and is he still the guy that you want upon your return?
Yes. I would definitely like to fight. I'll fight any of them that will give me a title shot, right? It doesn't matter who it is. Everybody's saying nobody's calling out Yoel. I say anybody ahead of me who gets me a title shot. Anybody, if it includes Yoel, includes, what's the other guy's name? Anybody ahead of me that gets me a title shot, or anybody behind me that will give me a title shot. One fight, then a title shot, because I'm beating anybody they put in front of me. So I want the title shot. Everybody feels like if you're not saying you want the title shot, you're not on social media crying about a title shot, then you don't want a title shot. It's like, look, man, if my job is to fight in the UFC, what am I doing here if it ain't for the title? I ain't no journeyman. I'm the best there is. So I guess if you guys want to hear it, I want the title shot. I'm not fighting these guys for peanuts. Shit, I want the bag. The big one. And I'll take the little one too. So.
Would you say, I mean, silver linings, when you look at silver linings with the injury, do you think it's a good thing that you weren't a backup for this fight? I mean, Yoel made weight, the fight went ahead, and it would have been the second time you would have had to be a backup for a fight, which I'm sure is super draining because you're not making sort of the money that you would normally fighting. So is that sort of one of the silver linings, not having to be the backup for a fight where you wouldn't have ultimately gotten it?
I don't mind being back. Again, I don't drain myself to cut weight. I'm not depleting my body to make weight. I don't know how those other guys are making weight, but I'm not depleting my body. You know what I'm saying? I'm not suffering to make weight. So I'll take, a couple of dozen, I'll take, I'll take some bread to make weight. Easy. That's easy money to me. Just make weight. And then I get to watch fights for free. I get flown out here for free. All this shit is right off my taxes. I was happy to be in that position. On top of that, my face is right there next to whoever's fighting for the title. You know what I'm saying? My face is right there. So everybody's saying, oh yeah, he just backed up for him, and then it must mean he's next in line. Essentially, that says that he's next in line. You know what I'm saying? If he's ready right then and there, if nobody else is, that means he's next in line. I know given the situation with Costa, it makes it a little intriguing, if you will. But I've said it before. I feel like I'm more deserving of a title than anybody in the top 10 in the middleweight division, for that matter. Again, like I said, I'm not sitting here crying and complaining and barking like the loudest dog behind the fence. I'm getting out and I'm biting people. You know what I'm saying? So that's just it. I'm just having fun, man. I'm just having fun, and again, it's only a matter of time. So and I'm going to enjoy the journey until I get to the top.
Absolutely. Got to get your thoughts, Jared, on the main event at UFC 248. Obviously, Israel Adesanya getting the win over Romero, but the fight coming under a lot of criticism. What did you think when you saw that one? I
thought what we saw happen was going to happen. I thought it was going to be a little bit more exciting, but what we saw happen, what happened was what I thought was going to happen, is what I said was going to happen. I said that if we see Romero do what Romero has done in his last couple of fights, which is back away, wait around, and, stand in front of his opponent and try to explode at the perfect moment, then Izzy's going to be able to snipe him from afar, pick him apart, and run his game, right? Okay, bell rings, ref says come out, go. Yoel stands in the middle of the ring for over a minute, right? Doesn't move. So, and at the same time, Izzy didn't really go for the kill. You know what I'm saying? So here's how if I would call that fight, I would say this is how it won. Izzy was successful in retaining his title, and Yoel didn't do much of anything to take the title, to win the title. So if you ask me who won the fight, that would be my reply. Izzy did enough to retain the title. I'm not gonna say he won that fight, even though technically he won that fight. But again, I'll say he did enough to retain the title. And that's kind of like what he was saying at the end. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna do what I got to do. It wasn't all pleasing to the casual fan. Pleasingly aesthetic to the fan. You know what these guys want to see. They got beer. Spewing out of the fucking nostrils, and they're ready to fight whoever's next to them and fuck the person behind them. And then, and that's why I can respect what happened that night. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't sitting there booing. I was sitting there intrigued. Of course, I'm potentially one of their guys' opponents.
Yeah.
So I'm watching with a more keen eye. But everybody else was, upset, felt disappointed. But me being in martial arts, I understand that this type of thing can happen. You know what I'm saying? Again, I was just downloading every bit, all 5 rounds. I was downloading every little bit of that right there. And I feel like I'm a better fighter after watching those 2 fights.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I feel that's how it went down. Izzy did enough to retain his title. So congratulations to him. Yoel did what I thought he was going to do. Sit back and wait for that big moment. And to be honest, when he did explode, he exploded at the perfect time. When he exploded, Izzy had nothing for him. He couldn't do nothing but get the hell out of there. You know what I'm saying? Get the fuck away. He wasn't even trying to counter. You know what I'm saying? Or anything. Most guys, he's trying to counter. He'll counter you while they're on while his opponent's on the way in. He's trying to counter, and after he moves out, he's trying to counter. He wasn't doing none of that when Yoel was exploding, doing his thing. So, people, you can say that they respected each other too much, or they employed a little too much caution. Yeah, to the fans' detriment, but not to mine.
I'm wondering, like you mentioned how you downloaded a lot of data. How different do you think a fight would be had you been in the position Yoel Romero was and you were the one facing Israel? And also, I'm wondering, what do you think about this relationship? I don't know if you have a relationship with Israel, but he's always been very, very praiseworthy of you. And he believes the fight between you and him, 2 black men, main eventing for the belt, is very important for the history and the culture of the sport. What do you make of that?
He said that when he
did.
Said
he said that to us. Yeah, we got receipts.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, you're the first people I heard, in reference to it being two black men.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few different thoughts on that. But it's again, like I said, coming from a striker at his level who's been doing it at the level he's been doing it in. I've watched his career since before he was in the UFC. I've learned from watching his highlight videos, from watching his fights and stuff. So from my perspective, I have an appreciation for guys who contribute to the martial arts. I don't want to say culture, but, to that thing called martial arts, right? He's contributed to martial arts, and I've taken from that. With that being said, it's high praise coming from a guy like that. He's definitely recognized what I've done and definitely sees potential in what I can do. Especially if he's saying that, he sees us having a good fight for the title one day. That means he knows exactly what I know. I'm going to get my shot at the title, So, I appreciate that. As far as the black man thing, I've heard, for one thing, I've caught flack for my name. People, liken it to Mandingo era fighting. So, some people try to introduce a little stain to the name in that regard, but that was nowhere near my consciousness when I was thinking about the name. My name is in awe and in admiration for the for a gorilla. Speak for a gorilla. And kill a gorilla sounds cool, so you know how we do. It's sports and entertainment, so I might as well look cool at the same time while I'm getting my message across. I lost track of what I was saying, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because there's so much respect between both of you, Jared. We saw what happened with Yoel Romero and Israel Adesanya, and you mentioned how you learned so much from watching that fight. I guess the big question a lot of people would have is, if you were in there instead of Yoel Romero, how do you think that fight would go down? How do you think a Jared Cannonier versus Israel Adesanya fight goes in your mind, especially after seeing that fight that we saw this past weekend?
Yeah. Well, again, I employ a different style, So my goal, my whole prerogative in the fight is to do damage with be the most effective, you know what I'm saying, being the most efficient while employing maximum effectiveness and power, you know what I'm saying? So, and I also employ tactic. You know, I'm not going to sit and wait. You know what I'm saying? I may sit and wait. I like to employ psychology. It's not just physical for me. It's mental as well. And then it's spiritual as well for me. And personally, it's spiritual for me. And then that translates down through my mental into my physical. So who knows how that fight will go. But again, after watching the last fight, seeing how Izzy does his thing and seeing how he, you know what I'm saying, how he tries to manipulate his opponent in his fights. I think I don't think that would work too well against me. I think I'll be able to download that real quickly and be able to adjust to that very quickly in the fight. At that point, we would see him making his adjustments because I know he's going to make some adjustments. And then it's going to be a very technical, it's going to be very high stakes because when I swing, you know what I'm saying, you know, I do damage. My goal is to do as much damage, you know what I'm saying, with the least amount of effort, you know what I'm saying? So it's going to be a beautiful thing. I know that much. And actually, when I debuted at middleweight, me and him, we actually met backstage because he had just fought Derek Brunson. And he was back there doing, you know, his post-fight media stuff, you know what I'm saying, taking pictures and doing all that stuff. And I was making my rounds after doing my fight. So I had introduced him, you know, I saw him. So I was already kind of ecstatic to see him after I had just watched his fight. You know what I'm saying? After watching his entrance, you guys saw how he entered the fight, into the cage in that fight. And then, you know, I drew energy from that. You know what I'm saying? People said I imitated him, but they don't know how dogs act. So, but if you go back and watch that, I entered in a response to the way he entered to send a message, not only to him, but to whoever, anybody in the middleweight division. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, we introduced ourselves backstage. You know what I'm saying? I introduced myself to him, and you know, I fanned out a little bit. You know, I want to let you know I'm a big fan of yours, man. I've been watching you for a long time, and I'm excited to see you here in the UFC and all that, you know, all that shit. And, you know, he said he didn't see my fight, you know what I'm saying, but he was respectful and stuff like that. And he said that he said something. He said I can't remember how the conversation goes, but he said that we'll meet. You know what I'm saying? Essentially, he was sizing me up, saying that we'll fight because he was trying. I guess at that point he was ready to fight everybody. So
yeah.
But yeah, he said, we'll meet. I'm like, okay, yeah. Well, let's take a picture then. You know what I'm saying? Come here, let's take a picture. Let's seal the deal, essentially. In my mind is what I said. But we took our picture and then, you know what I'm saying, parted ways at that point. And that was the beginning of my MMA, my middleweight debut. And we saw what happened with him after that. So
yeah.
But yeah, it's, you know, nothing but respect to the man. I'm happy to see him doing his thing. I love seeing him put on for the people. You know what I'm saying? I can't express my love, appreciation, gratitude for that specifically. He's doing it in a very righteous manner. You know what I'm saying? So I have nothing but respect. We don't have to antagonize anybody or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? It's all about greatness. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's great in their own way. And I just love seeing our greatness shine like that. So hats off to the man, and I look forward to our fight.
Well, there you go, guys. How can you really top that, Jared? It's been such a pleasure chatting to you today. Obviously, follow the man on Twitter and Instagram at KillerGorillaMMA. I feel like this is the first of many appearances and first of many chats. I really appreciate your time, man. So thank you so much. I know you mentioned around 5 to 6 months, and obviously Darren Till is still the fight that you want to see when you do return. So we look forward to obviously watching your recovery and then especially coming back into the octagon. Yeah,
I should be back. I should be cleared to fight, you know, beginning fall time, end of summertime. So you guys are going to see me back again this year. If not Darren Till, I would definitely love to get that fight again with Robert. Again, he's one of those guys who are up there who's going to give me a title shot after we do our thing. So I would still like that fight. Hopefully his situations have ironed out and everybody came out okay out of that situation. So So yeah, that's about it.
Looking forward to seeing you back in there, man. Thank you so much for your time, Jared. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Talk to you guys later.
And there he is, guys. Jared Cannonier, great guy to chat to, great chat, and just a great show in general, man. I really enjoyed this one. Really got me excited.
Yeah, man. Listen, it's great to be able to get these kinds of guys together and really talk about what transpired in the weekend. I feel like we kind of learned a lot more than just that. Like Tim Kennedy, unbelievable stories. Jared Cannonier making his first show appearance, which is crazy. You'd think the guy's been on before. We've interviewed him in person, but never officially on the show. And Luke Thomas, I mean, how could you not love a Luke Thomas appearance? That is us for the week. We appreciate you guys. Enjoy the fights this weekend, and we'll catch you next week.